Perhaps one of the reasons why this case is so intriguing is the abundance of information that's been acquired concerning this case, and yet nobody really knows what happened. Due to the nature of this case, many theories have been developed to better understand the events that occurred at Dyatlov, so we will be discussing some of these theories and hopefully find a solution that might satisfy the mysterious events that occurred. These photos being displayed, which document their journey, were some of the last photos that were taken of the hikers. Now before we start the case, we have to understand a little bit of context as to what exactly happened. The hiking group consisted of 8 men and 2 women, with Igor Dyatlov as their group leader. They were all very experienced hikers who had hiked in many mountainous regions previous to this expedition. They had achieved many triumphant climbs together, and were also attempting to break world records related to mountaineering expeditions. And so, with all their gear in hand, they set off on their actual expedition on January the 23rd. 5 days in, a hiker by the name of Yuri would return due to illness, while the rest of the hikers would continue their journey. On February 1st, they approached an area known as Dead Mountain. They spent most of the day climbing the mountain and decided to set up camp only a couple hundred meters from its peak, which was not their original camping spot they planned out. It is unknown why the hikers made the decision to set up their tent at this location, which is indicated by the map, as opposed to the original camping location. February 12th. That was the day the hikers were supposed to return, but despite their experience and expertise in mountaineering, the hikers did not return from their journey on schedule. The 12th came and went, and so did the 13th, and then the 14th, but there was no trace of them whatsoever. 12 days later, on the 26th, a search and rescue party spotted a tent and made their way towards it. Upon arrival, it was very clear something was wrong. The searchers were greeted with an abandoned tent standing alone in the barren landscape. A sudden realization came over them, understanding that a great tragedy had befallen on these hikers, and the families would have to deal with immediate repercussions of never seeing their loved ones again. Then, a larger search effort, which consisted of mostly volunteers, was launched so they could locate the missing hikers. Eventually, everyone was found, and an autopsy was created for each of the hikers. Here is what was written. On February the 27th, rescuers found the first 2 bodies, which are located about 1.5 kilometers down the slope from the tent. They belonged to group members Yuri K and Yuri D. Looking closely at the wooded area, remains of a fire could be seen. Yuri D was found frozen to death with minimal clothing and a burn on his hand. It was noted that the volume work done to maintain the fire was more than what 2 individuals could handle, which suggests the group splitting up after reaching the location. Next to be found was Igor Dyatlov, then Zeneta, whose body conditions appeared to be completely normal given the fact that they froze to death. However, the next hikers to be found had some shocking injuries. First was Rustam. He had a fractured skull and multiple abrasions on his face and arms. The last 4 hikers were found in a place called the Den. The Den was located in a small ravine about 3 meters deep. 3 of the 4 sustained fatal injuries were compared to that of a car crash. 1 sustained major skull damage, while the other 2 had missing eyeballs. 1 of them also had a missing tongue along with broken ribs. These injuries were termed to be sustained while they were alive. 2 of these members in this group were found to have abnormally radioactive clothing items, and none of the hikers were found to be intoxicated in any way. Every single one of the group members were extremely underdressed. So what happened? Were they murdered? Maybe they had an argument, or maybe the Russians had something to do with it. Maybe it was just a freak accident like an avalanche, or maybe it was something supernatural. To understand what happened, we have to first start with what we know. For a yet unknown reason, the hikers collectively decide to leave the tent. They leave their hiking gear as well as other important items such as proper clothing and protection. Once they go outside, they head down to the wooded area lower down the mountain and construct a campfire, while the better dressed members split up to look for resources and a location to camp more permanently. After splitting up from their makeshift camp, the better dressed members who were searching for a place to camp accidentally stumble across some loose snow, and 4 of them accidentally fall into their small ravine, fracturing their skulls and causing their broken ribs. The 5th member slides his way down, and they start building their small shelter in a desperate attempt to survive. Inevitably though, trapped in the ravine and unable to reach the fire back at the woods, they freeze to death and lie there undiscovered for months on end, before their discovery in April. After months of being exposed to the elements, bacteria rot away the tongue and eyeballs, which explains this portion of the mystery. If you consider the fact that they were found in the warmer months, then the snow melting over the bodies causing the decomposition makes sense, leading to where we are now. Mystery solved, right? Well, not really, because you see, we still don't know why the hikers left the safety of their tent. But with enough discussion, we were able to narrow it down to a few possible theories. The first one is a bit of a stretch, but regardless of whether or not you believe in aliens, this theory is still worth mentioning. On the night of February 1st, another group of hikers claimed to see glowing lights hovering around the mountain where the Dyatlov crew was camping. Also, This photo is one of the last photos taken by one of the cameras which one of the hikers had. Supposedly, it depicts an object in the night sky. If you look at the image closely, it does appear to look like glowing lights, but since it really doesn't have a whole lot of water to tread on, we'll move on to the next one. The next theory is a complicated one, but it just might prove to be true. It all starts with one group member, Simon Zolotarov. This man was definitely considered to be one of the more mysterious members of the group, according to family members. He was a bit of a newcomer and nobody really knew a whole lot about him. So, is it possible that Simon was responsible for the death of the hikers? Well, yes. It's possible that after setting up the tent, Simon forced the group to leave the tent and go into the outside weather without their gear. But why would Simon risk his life just to kill everyone else? Well, years after the incident, a DNA test was conducted on the person buried in Simon's grave. The purpose of this test was to compare the DNA with Simon and one of his ancestors. But when the results came back, the DNA was not a match. So it can be assumed that the person buried in Simon's grave is not the person who we think it is. This opens up many possible questions like, who was the person buried in that grave? And how did Simon's body end up getting lost in the first place? As for his intentions for committing such a crime, it's possible he was trying to escape from the Russian government or hide his identity. You see, Simon had gone through his time in the military without a single injury. He lied multiple times about his combat awards and asked everyone to call him by a name other than his own, Sasha. After being kicked out of multiple military schools, he joined the Dyatlov crew for this expedition. Before they departed, Sasha uttered these words: "The whole world will talk about this expedition." Coincidence? I think not. I think that out of fear of his past being discovered, he forced the crew to leave their tent so he could disappear from the Russians' radar forever, given that the Russians probably would have killed him. It was a perfect scenario for him, a desolate landscape with no developed civilization for 100 miles, with a way of disappearing off the Russians' radar forever. It's possible to say that he threatened the hikers at gunpoint and told them to leave the tent so he can make his escape. Case closed. As for the theme triumph and tragedy, these hikers were an experienced group of individuals who excelled in their hiking expeditions. They were professional and had triumphantly set many world records previous to this expedition, and the Dyatlov Pass was another example of those expeditions. The majority of the journey went smooth and easygoing. They made very good pace and they were accomplishing some of their goals they had in mind. It wasn't until they were nearing the end of their expedition when they ran into this tragedy and passed away. Now, why does this case matter? Well, in light of recent events, 60 years after the incident took place, the investigative committee reopened the case and moved it from the regional branch to the federal branch, which means it's a government investigation. But why did they reopen the case? Well, apparently Europeans are demanding an answer. People were unsatisfied with the government's method of gathering and examining information, so they reopened the case so they could change the way they conducted this examination, as well as future examination. What's interesting is they have already ruled out crime as a factor for this case. Ironic how they decided to rule out crime after getting blamed for it by multiple theories. Maybe it suggests something bigger. Maybe this case is only the surface of a bigger scheme that Russia would like to conceal. After all, it isn't out of the question to suggest a secret military base hidden in the Dyatlov Mountains. I think the true importance of this case is still being developed. But in the end, our conclusion might not matter. We might never know the truth of what happened on that fateful night of February 1st, because it doesn't matter how many theories we discuss or how many new theories, there will always be questions to answer. But I guess that's really the importance of unsolved cases, to question the things we believe to be true. It helps us understand the events that are occurring in our lives and examine things we never thought possible. Bigfoot was one of the theories that was mentioned, as well as UFOs being responsible for killing the hikers. Diving into this incident helped me understand much of the events that surround this case, but in the end, we can only speculate on the events that have occurred.